What's a deep dark rabbit hole to research when bored? Cryptozoology. It's interesting to say the least, but there are so many things that make you question what is out there in the world that we haven't discovered yet. When I first got into it, I thought cryptids were more like Bigfoot and the Loch Ness Monster, but there are hundreds or even thousands of other weird and unusual sightings of creatures many haven't even heard of. Fire disasters. And then never feel safe in an indoor crowded space ever again. There's actually video on YouTube of the Great White Disaster, and it's utterly horrifying how incredibly quickly it happens, and seeing the people literally stuck in the doorway unable to get out as they burn to death. As someone who still goes to a lot of shows at small packed music venues exactly like that one, and other totally packed bars and clubs, I'm always constantly looking for exits to find the nearest escape path, and it always freaks me out anytime there's any fire in any indoor space. Candles / sparklers / pyrotechnics / etc. Mass hysteria. There are different kinds that have affected different cultures in different ways. Multiple times throughout history, groups of people have uncontrollably danced themselves to deaths. In other parts of the world, men can become stricken with the belief that their penis is receding into their bodies. It was often believed the only way to prevent this from happening overnight was for family members to hold their members etc. This should give you an hour or two. List of unusual deaths. Daniel John O'Brien, 31, committed suicide by jumping into one of the engines of a British Airways Boeing 747 at Pierco International Airport, Trinidad. He is said to have scaled an airport wall in the nude, attacked 4 security guards, and stole their 4-wheel drive vehicle, drove the vehicle into the jet, then clambered out of the wreckage, smeared grease on his bleeding shoulder, and hurled himself into one of the plane's engines. Now that's some fucking commitment. Prion diseases. Every single one is weird and dark. It includes cannibalism and family curses, and deers walking onto legs, and industrial farming plus forced cow cannibalism. I would also add treating people with dead people's brain extract, and also that fungi can get prions, but they just don't care that much. Fungi are weird. 2 fun facts I learned in med school about this. The most common human prion disease is Creutzfeldt-Jakob, and 85% of cases occur spontaneously. There is a widespread mutation in the human population that protects against Kuru, a human prion disease spread by cannibalizing brains. This suggests cannibalism was a common practice at some point in human history. The town of Skidmore, Missouri in the US. It's sort of a small topic, but it leads in so many different directions. It's most famous for the murder of the town bully. That's a mild name for him. He was horrible, in the middle of the day, on the main street, with a bunch of witnesses, but no one has ever been arrested. But there's also the later case of a woman who was murdered and her unborn baby stolen, and even later a teenager, who was related to the murdered woman, just disappeared and is thought to have been taken by a serial killer. All this in a town of fewer than 200 people. I'm not superstitious, but I also wouldn't move there. There is a documentary on Sundance about the bully, but the best introduction is a book called In Broad Daylight. From there, you just get farther and farther down tangential paths, trying to figure out what have happened. Less info on the 2 later cases, but still an internet black hole you can fall into for days. Caving and cave diving accidents. Accidentally watched one on YouTube, then went down the rabbit hole. This led to some more parallel topics of horrible fates, bad deaths etc. After few days, started getting disturbed sleep as this became my routine of watching before the sleep time. With self-restraint, finally I got out of it. Bushman's Hole, an underwater cave that goes down nearly a 1,000. The domino effect that led up to World War I, and then later World War II. It's interesting to learn about, but it's just a clusterfuck of easily preventable situations. I've also heard the world wars referred to as the Second 30 Years' War, which I find a really fascinating perspective. Both were periods of conflict on a global scale, with a relative lull for a time, before large-scale action resumed. Many don't realize that, for some countries, especially in Europe and the Middle East, WWI didn't end. It just evolved into numerous civil conflicts, such as the Armenian Genocide, the Finnish Civil War, the Russian Civil War. Hell, the Italians went to war with Yugoslavia before the ink had dried on the tree of Versailles. Poland and Ukraine went to war, then became best friends, and fought the Bolsheviks together, all in the same year. WWI in a sense, ended because everybody decided, fuck this, you'll figure it out yourselves, I'm going home, and finding someone else to fight. Instead of big team fights, it just became a bunch of battle royales or tag team matches. Interwar action was damn near as intense as WWI had been. Shipwrecks. Been absolutely obsessed with them the past few days. There's so much to discover and learn about, and so much corruption as well as just interesting circumstances that these huge machines go down in. And adding to that, technical diving accidents, especially in shipwrecks. You can dive down to the sunken and rear Doria that wrecked because another enormous ship collided sideways into it. Ship and collect first class dinnerware as plunder, but people have died, seemingly becoming lost in the complete darkness of the halls inside, or user error in any capacity, such as not having the correct oxygen tank levels, leading to hallucinations and false confidence that makes you drown. Can confirm about sea survival stories. A good place to start would be the Discovery Channel show I Shouldn't Be Alive. That led me to research one of the episodes about two survivors, Brad Kavanagh and Deborah Scaling Killy. It started out with maybe 5 survivors, and one of them had septicemia from an open wound on her leg, and the water at the bottom of the lifeboat was filthy. They had to dump her body overboard and listen as the sharks tore her body apart. Even though it was all done by actors years later, it was horrifying to watch. A video sometimes shows up here of a scuba diver recovering bodies from a wreck at the bottom of the Atlantic Ocean, and suddenly he sees a hand reach into the water. Harrison Ajegbarokin survived for 3 days in the trapped air and was recovered somewhere around May 29, 2013. And then there's the story of the sinking of the Oceanus on August 4, 1991. Captain Ioannis Avranis abandoned ship, leaving all the passengers to fend for themselves. An employee, specifically a guitarist, ended up heading the rescue effort on the ship along with his girlfriend. They saved hundreds. There's a great little group exercise you can take to see if your mindset matches that of the US Coast Guard when it comes to survival items, ranked by importance. Just Google Lost at Sea Instructions 819-2015 and you'll see what I mean. Art forgery and fakes. I've been watching a BBC series called Fake or Fortune where people try to get their art validated as being by an old master. They've had Renoir, Monet, etc. The program goes into how both modern day and historic forgers use techniques to make a picture or sculpture look original. It sometimes also shows how corrupt the art validation world can be, with one episode showing overwhelming evidence that a picture was genuine, but the organization responsible for cataloging the original works of the artist refusing to acknowledge it. Interestingly, the head of that institute is now under investigation in France for hoarding €1 billion worth of missing artworks. Art and antiquities theft is truly fascinating. It's a whole business market. You get high enough art houses, brokers, etc. there's no way they aren't involved in some sort of underhand deal. Painting valuation is interesting. There's reasons to keep things off the books. One of those reasons is government intervention. Many governments get heavily involved in antiquities, and not always for the cultural preservation reasons you would think. I don't know the details of the exact situation you referenced, but I could see the art house electing not to acknowledge the official painting for a number of reasons. It could potentially hurt the valuation of their collection. There may also be some sort of red tape from the government depending on artist/age. It's also very likely that it was certified unofficially for an off-record acquisition by a third party. If the painting was formally recognized, auction is typical. Buyer could not wanted to risk losing it to auction, and also may have wanted to maintain anonymity instead of going through an auction house. How does one hoard billions in historical art? That whole thing sounds fishy, and like backdoor deals where the art house is taking the fall for their clients. If you remember the institute, let me know. I'd love to dive down that rabbit hole. Money laundering through Counter-Strike Global Offensive weapon skins. You can track all the expensive items, $1,000 to $15 plus, in bothead inventories and trace all the trade histories. There are about 20 accounts that have each $500 $1.2 meter inventory value, all tracing back to one person. For example, sleep paralysis, audio/visual hallucinations across cultures throughout history. It's disturbing. I experienced this as a teenager. I'd see a tall, thin shadowy figure in the corner of the room. It almost seemed amorphous, but basically bipedal and had wings, webbing on its back and underarms. It would sort of ooze down to the floor, stand upright at the foot of my bed for a bit, then sort of ooze into the air a few feet over my body and just sort of stare, no eyes, really, at me for a while, until I could move again. It didn't really talk, but it sort of breathed/whispered gibberish at me in a very hostile manner. I'll be glad if I never experience that again. Religious cults. There's so many documentaries out there, literally weeks of entertainment. I spent like a solid month a year or two ago watching documentaries/YouTube videos about the Mormon Church. There's a crap ton of videos and articles about the various Christian fundie groups, cults, and once you get deep into the rabbit hole it's honestly scary. Like straight up sinister.